Hey folks, how's it going? Thanks for checking out the video. Today we're going to look at the field parameters feature in Power BI Desktop. As part of the May 2022 Power BI Desktop release, we got a brand new feature, field parameters, and the Power BI community has been going crazy for it. Now, it's a feature that's quite dear to my heart. Around about this time last year, I released a video on YouTube about how to do dynamic measures in Power BI. Now, I was quite proud of that YouTube video. It was one of my first videos to do quite well. In it, I featured several techniques that you could implement dynamic features. The significance with field parameters, it now gives us another option for doing it. Let's take a look at the end report result from that last video. So as you can see, I've got a slicer across the top, which allows me to select which measure I want to use. And with that measure selected, the contents of both my chart and my card up here in the right corner change automatically. The challenge then for me is to see how quickly and easily we can recreate this existing report using the new field parameters feature. So let's go have a go. So I've got a clean report here now. You can see that my calculation group, which was previously being used to facilitate those dynamic measures, has been removed. I've just kept in this multi-row card here just to see the measures that I'm using. Now, field parameters is a preview feature, so the first thing you need to do is switch on that preview feature. So you need to go to File, go to Options and Settings and Options. Down on the left hand side here you will see Preview Features. So select that, and then down here at the bottom we've got Field Parameters, so we want to click that. And then Power BI Desktop will need a restart. Once that restart's taken effect, we can go back into Power BI and have a go at recreating the report. So the new feature is up here on the Modelling tab. So if we click that, we can go to New Parameter. From the drop down here we've got two options, Numeric Range and Fields. Numeric Range is referring to the what if parameters that were already a feature in Power BI. It's this fields parameter option that we want to select, so let's click that and we get this lovely dialog box. So it's fields that we want to be able to adjust. What do we want to call the parameter? I'm going to call it dynamic measure, and then I need to select which fields I want to be included in my dynamic measure. So from my sales measures I'm going to select sales revenue and sales unit quantity and sales margin percentage. One of the things that featured in the previous video I did on this is the way to set the order that the measures are going to appear in the slicer. I think it's important when implementing this as a feature that potentially the most important measure for your stakeholders gets listed first. Now when you're using this user interface, you'll add them to this pane in the order that you click them. So I want sales revenue first. Because I clicked it first, it went to the top of the pile. If for argument's sake I've added those in the wrong order, all I need to do is drag them and I can change the order really easily. The other thing this dialog box does is it has an option to make sure you add a slice to the page automatically. Okay, so that's what I want to see. Here's my slicer. I'm just going to quickly set that to be a horizontal orientation. Let's resize that. Okay, now I'm going to add my area chart. So in my original report that was done by calendar year month, so I'm going to add that to the x-axis. Now in the y-axis, what you'll see now, we've got a dynamic measure table with a dynamic measure field. I'm going to add dynamic measure into my y-axis. And here we go. We've got a chart showing sales revenue for the last 12 months. The other thing that featured in my previous report was a KPI card. So let's add this up here as well. And I'm also going to add dynamic measures to that too. And let's have a quick play about. So currently showing sales revenue 5 billion. Change that to sales unit quantity. You can see that the units in my y-axis have changed automatically. The units in my card have changed automatically as well. And when I select sales margin, it changes to a percentage and my axis changes on my chart as well. So it really is that simple. Are there a few things that are worth calling out here that are a bit different? Yes, there are. So I'm just going to do a quick comparison versus that original report. One of the things that you will see on this version is when I flicked between my unit quantity on my sales margin on my revenue, I quite niftily got it to change colour in the chart. And the way to do that is by adding in the legend my measure selection column. That's the name of the column that contained my calculation items. So if I go back to my field parameters and I try and do the same thing, so if I add dynamic measure to my legend here, that doesn't seem to work. You're not able to add the measure selection to the dynamic measures. I believe there are ways and means with conditional formatting you could get around that, but it just doesn't happen quite as quickly and easily and natively. Second thing to compare, back to my dynamic measures report. In my card here on the right hand side, you will see it's labelled as dynamic measure. Again, using that calculation group, the measure was called dynamic measure, and so by default the label in a card will show that as well. Now compare that to the new field parameters. It's a bit better. What it actually does, as well as changing the DAX calculation that's going to be triggered when you select the field parameter you want to use, it even changes the label as well, which is pretty nifty to be honest. Now let's take a very quick look under the hood here. If I look at my model view, you'll see here that I have a disconnected table. This is in my dynamic measure table. And if I look in my data view, you can see what's been created. So we've got the column dynamic measure being shown. There's a second column which actually lists the DAX measure being displayed, and then also you've got the measure order there as well. And then back to my report view, if I actually select the dynamic measure here, you can see the DAX that's created. So this seems to be using a brand new DAX function called name of. Now I can't say that I understand fully what that DAX is doing. Certainly I can see that the UI both creates that disconnected table for you automatically and creates that measure for you with that DAX. And one of the things that's been pointed out by the community, that dialog box, that UI that pops up to be able to create that field parameter, once you've done it once you can't get back to it. You can create a new one but there isn't no edit option. Now there is a hack for that, because you can see the DAX that's being generated and you can see that for each measure you want to include in that field parameter, the line of DAX is very, very easy to copy. So if you need to add additional ones, or indeed if you need to remove any as well, that should be plenty simple to do. So ultimately, what do I think about this feature? How does that compare with the other techniques that we've used previously? Well, the old-fashioned way to do this was to use a disconnected table with a switch measure. And one of the things that was debunked in the previous video I did was that that works well if all the measures you want to use have the same format, but you can only specify one format on that measure, so you don't get that dynamic formatting with your measures. Now this implementation, as you can see, seems to solve that. If you're switching between a currency or a percentage or an integer, the formats change with it, so it solves that problem absolutely. What about comparing it with the calculation group method that I've used previously as well, and something that I've definitely advocated previously? The only drawback with that method was the fact that you couldn't implement it natively in Power BI Desktop. You had to use Tabular Editor to be able to create that calculation group. Now there are people who work for organisations who don't allow the use of third-party tools. That option hasn't been available to them. Now not only did that calculation group help solve the issue with the dynamic formatting, but also with the help of C# scripts, you could automate the process really, really easily as well. But take a look at that UI. We just demonstrated in a matter of minutes that it's actually really, really, really simple to set this up in Power BI Desktop too. And for me, the fact that they can actually dynamically change the label of the measure as well makes this an even better option. This works better than the calculation group, in my opinion. The thing is, this field parameter feature goes even further. It doesn't just stop there. If we head back into our report, what I can demonstrate is that those field parameters aren't just for measures. I'm going to just move my dynamic measure, slice it up a little bit, go back to my modeling tab, and go to a new fields parameter here as well. Now what I can do, not just my measures, I can actually dynamically change the dimension that's being used as well. So I'm using calendar year month currently in this report, but let's have a look at adding the product category name, and I'm going to also add my sales channel. And again, I'm going to add that slice to the page. And I'm going to make it horizontal again. Next, I'm going to change this chart here to be a bar graph instead. And in my x-axis, I'm going to swap this out and I'm going to use that new parameter I've just created. So with calendar year month selected, I can see sales margin by calendar year month, and I can change that up or look at unit quantity or sales revenue instead if I want to. But also I can dynamically change the category on the axis as well. So now I'm seeing my sales revenue by category name, but I can see unit quantity or sales margin if I want to. And likewise, if I want to change that to my marketing channel, I can slice and dice that too. So this is actually a really powerful feature, and one that goes well beyond the calculation group that we were using for measures previously. Now I've got to admit, I've got a real fondness for that calculation group, especially the fact that I was able to script it and automate that so effectively. But this kind of makes that a little bit obsolete, to be honest. So my recommendation going forward, jump on this feature. I think it's really powerful. It's really easy to use. It's opened up and more accessible to far more of the Power BI community because there's no reliance on third-party tools. Big thumbs up from me. I hope that's been useful. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, please use that comment section below. If you have enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to follow along for more Power BI content from me, please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks once again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.